The power of the Columbia has been vital after a push for green energy and therefore clean hydropower. The Dales Dam was finished in 1957 and is located on the river. Although this construction created a large amount of energy to support the growing population of nearby cities, the people of the Yakama Nation lost an important cultural site, Celilo Falls. This was an important area for people to practice their fishing rights as well as a center for trade. It also disturbed salmon runs and has led to the declining population of salmon in the Columbia River.
New hydroelectric operations are on their way to the basin and pose the same threat to more important areas of the Yakama Nation. One of these sources is pumped hydropower. Rather than damming up rivers to guide water through the turbines, 2 reservoirs at 2 different elevations would allow water to be pumped up and then drive turbines back down to the lower reservoir by gravity.
This idea is a step in the right direction after decades of declining salmon runs coincided with the damming of the Columbia River. However, a different resource other than salmon is being threatened by a pumped hydro project near Goldendale, Washington. Land sacred to the tribal people of the Yakama Nation. The undisturbed sagebrush steppe habitat of Putalish is where the Goldendale Energy Storage Project plans to site their pumped hydropower reservoirs.
Putalish is the tribal ancestral name for Juniper Point, and it stands for the Mother of Roots. This high ridge is covered in juniper bushes and roots, and towers over the waters of the Columbia River. It is where the Yakama people have gathered and still gather their first foods and medicines since time immemorial.
Power companies see the east side of Washington as empty land, as it is significantly less populated than the west side, but they neglect the cultural significance of the area and the cultural resources greatly valued by the Yakama people. Dams began in 1938 on the Columbia River. Families were removed and historical sites were lost. Today, 80 to 90% of proposed solar projects in Washington are on Yakama ceded land. These lands are all connected to the Department of Natural Resources or Bureau of Land Management, but the natives who have rights to the land have not been included or well represented in these conservations of proposed projects. Wind farms also exclude indigenous peoples from their ceded land through fences and changing land use. They also endanger eagles and other birds in the area. Renewable energy is an important emphasis in today's climate. However, the way power companies are taking over the area and disregarding cultural significance of the area is not equitable.
The Goldendale proposed energy project is to construct a closed-loop pumped storage hydropower facility. It would have upper and lower reservoirs located at Juniper Point. It will also act as an energy storage unit for wind and solar power electricity abundance. When electricity supply is high, power from nearby wind farms would be used to pump water up the hill from the lower to the upper reservoir. During periods of low electricity supply, such as when the wind isn't blowing or sun isn't shining, water would be released from the upper reservoir down an underground 20-foot diameter pipe, spinning turbines in the powerhouse, then discharged to the lower reservoir.
The proposed project will consist of the following new facilities: an underground powerhouse with 3 400-megawatt turbine generator units, a tunnel and vertical shaft, an upper reservoir of 7.8 million cubic yards, and a lower reservoir of 5.6 million cubic yards. The initial fill water of these 2 reservoirs and any replacement water needed after evaporation would be taken from the Columbia River. Installing these facilities and drilling a tunnel underground would destroy the cultural integrity of this landscape. There is no method of installation on this sort of scale that would avoid the loss of Putalish and all of the gifts it has provided to the Yakama people. However, this does not mean we believe that the project should be canceled in its entirety. We think it should not be placed on undeveloped land. Choosing an area that has previously been developed would be a much more fair use of resources.
The Greater Goldendale Area Chamber of Commerce is predictably pro-project. They submitted a public comment that includes their motives for heading the project. They claim that, quote, "the more one considers this project, the better it looks for our community," unquote. Because this project would, quote, "bring companies and industries to Goldendale with the goal to generate sustainable long-term employment and prosperity to the community," unquote. Through their eyes, they only see pros. These pros include jobs provided, local merchants, prosperity, and tax revenue for Klickitat County. The Klickitat County Public Economic Development Authority also submitted a public comment that expresses support towards the Goldendale Energy Storage Project. They mentioned the economic challenges that followed the closing of the Gorge aluminum smelter, closing in 2003. The Public Economic Development Authority claims that this is, quote, "an opportunity to once again realize economic prosperity for central Klickitat County by redeveloping a former industrial site for a new suitable use," unquote. They also mention how this project will help with brownfield remediation at the Gorge aluminum smelter site, which has been a long-standing environmental concern. Lastly, they mention that power grid reliability will increase because they would be able to store excess solar and wind energy. They mention the environmental impact statement, but are selective with their words and completely skip any mentions of Indigenous peoples.
The Klickitat County Natural Resources and Economic Development Department submitted a comment that addresses the Tribal Resources Analysis Report. They mentioned that this project would fall on top of private property and only transmission lines would fall outside of public property. The treaties guarantee the signatory tribes the privilege of hunting, gathering roots and berries, and pasturing their horses and cattle upon open and unclaimed land. And private property is not opened and unclaimed land. This condones the usage of the land.
The Columbia Gorge Climate Action Network believes the application should be declined in its current state. They recommend a thorough mitigation plan that is supported by the tribes, greater consideration for the fish and wildlife of the area, and a full analysis of the mediation impacts of the site, as well as a thorough market analysis that the project will be economically competitive. They also criticize the environmental impact statement when it says the impact of construction is minimal, and show the full number of emissions and electricity that will be consumed throughout the building of the pump. Finally, they asked to see an EIS of the construction, not just the project as a whole. The Confederated Tribes and Bands of the Yakama Nation submitted a comment opposing the project. They claim that there are direct negative project impacts to the Yakama Nation treaty resources. Only the Yakama Nation may determine what is culturally significant to their people. Their identity is intrinsically interwoven into the cultural resources given in the treaty. And this area specifically has strong cultural and resource value. In conclusion, there will be irrevocable damage done to their natural resources if this project continues.
The chief of the Kamiltpa band of the area, Bronsko Matichum Jim Jr., describes the impact of green energy on the tribes in the area and how these projects only hurt the permanent residents. They do not use energy created by these windmills, solar farms, or hydro pumps in the area. The land has cultural value and is an important food source. He even points out the lack of economic incentive, as this area has little jobs available to permanent residents. Bronsko speaks from personal experience and history and allows the reader the opportunity to learn from the mistakes of the past. Our recommendations for future renewable energy use is that locations should be sited on already developed land and not undisturbed lands. Also, in all stages of planning, the tribe should have access to the plans and have a bigger say in the decisions being made. Environmental impact studies should be performed specific to the construction and installation of these facilities. The assumption that all aspects of this project are green is incorrect.
Reciprocity.
Respect.
Prevalence.
Responsibility.
Relatedness.
Relationships.
Redistribution. In conclusion, Yakama Nation cultural resources are threatened by this project.
The planning and locating of these reservoirs should be adjusted in accordance with the tribe.
There is common ground, and we must all work together in order to achieve a smooth and just transition towards a clean energy future.
Jackie, what leaves are these?
This is a red alder, Alnus rubra. You can tell that it's a red alder because of the way that it is. Big leaf maple.
Big leaf maple.
Acer
macrophyllum.
macrophyllum, yeah.